inshallah.
Yes.
Okay, so Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, distinguished scholars, thinkers, and esteemed guests today. It is my great honor to welcome all of you to today's academic session organized by Insania Intellectual Circle, IIC. IIC is a vibrant epistemic community dedicated to fostering critical thought, dialogue, and scholarly engagement and on global issues that shape our world today. This circle brings together scholars, practitioners, and thinkers from around the globe to explore a range of topics related to philosophy, civilizational studies, and more. We are especially proud to host this session where we have the privilege of engaging with the profound work of Professor Dr. Ahmet Davutoğlu, one of the most influential intellectual figures of our times. Our session today, we bring together participants from across the globe, including Malaysia and Turkey. It's 10 a.m. in Turkey right now, I suppose.
Yes, yes.
For those who are not familiar with Dr. Ahmed's contribution, he is an internationally renowned Turkish scholar, diplomat, and former Prime Minister of Turkey from 2014 to 2016. Born in Konya, Turkey in 1959, Professor Dr. Davutoğlu academic journey began at Boğaziçi University, where he earned degrees in economics and political science. He went on to complete his PhD in political science and international relations, serving at many university and prestigious institutions, including IIUM in Malaysia also.
Yes.
Professor Davutoğlu is most widely recognized for his pioneering work in political theory and philosophical engagement with civilization. His landmark book, Alternative Paradigm, offers a profound critique of the Western-centric global system and argues for a more equitable and multipolar world order. His scholarly insights are further enriched by his practical experience in politics, particularly as Turkey's foreign minister. Professor Davutoğlu's intellectual work challenged the prevailing intellectual international structure and advocates for cultural and civilizational pluralism, calling for a reformation of global governance. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Professor Ahmet Davutoğlu, who will be speaking to us about his intellectual journeys and his key ideas that underpin alternative paradigm, strategic death, and civilizational transformation in the world, in the Muslim order. Professor Dr. Ahmed, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Brother Ashraf. When I received this invitation from Malaysia, I was very happy and honored because Malaysia is my second home. I still smell I can feel the smell of durian everywhere. I love durian. Dear brothers and sisters, it is a great pleasure for me to be back in Malaysia, although through Zoom. When I received the invitation, the main question was the link between alternative paradigms and strategic depth. Let me start how I approach and how I try to integrate this. At the end of the day, three main questions are there, or the consciousness, or human consciousness based on three parameters, three levels, three spheres, you can say. One is time, one is being, the other one is time and space. So the main question is for humanity, for any human being throughout the history and today is, who am I? First question is not space or time. Space and time is the ontological existence of this being. I am from the third generation of Turkish Republic. I wrote an article in 1999. In fact, it was first an analysis when I was in Malaysia about the rewriting of Muslim history in 20th century. In Turkey, my generation, first let me give you a short analysis of my generation in Turkey and how did I ask these questions to myself and how did I have this intellectual journey, even an adventure, still continuing. The first generation of the Muslim world in general and Turkey in particular, in the first quarter of 20th century, my grandfather's generation They had to make wars, on several fronts, against imperialism, colonialism, invasion, First World War, War of Liberation. So they didn't have any chance to make sophisticated questions, to answer sophisticated questions. They had a problem of political survival. The end of the caliphate, the first quarter from late 19th century until 1924. Second generation of Turkey, they were grown up in a very secular world. They didn't have, many of them didn't have any educational facility like my father. He was graduate of primary school from a very, on the top of mountains in southern Turkey. They had a huge struggle, economic struggle, urbanization, economic problems, several challenges. Our generation, who were born in 1950s, 1960s, I can say this is the third generation, but the second generation, the Muslim world, brothers and sisters, including Malaysia, after the end of the Ottoman Caliphate, from 1924 until 1948, there were only three independent Muslim states, Turkey, Iran, and Afghanistan. But they didn't have any Islamic, idealism of politics. So therefore, all of the main jama'ats, what we call today, the main communities did emerge during this time of when there was an absence of political authority, like Ikhwan al-Muslimin, like Jamaat Islami, like Muhammadiyah movement in Indonesia, all are from these 1920s, 1930s, 1940s. After the Second World, several Muslim states did emerge. Now we have 57 Muslim states, and we have a huge population in Muslim diaspora. Now, our generation in the Arab world had to deal with Arab nationalism of Nasser, of Saddam. And in Malaysia, there was a new state of Malaysia. And the identity of Malaysian politics or Indonesia, these names even themselves, in fact, there were not big differences between Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, but there were new nation states, like many Arab states did emerge. When I was even in primary school, I had several questions in my mind. And when Masjid al-Aqsa was burned in 1969, I participated. I was 10 years old. I participated to a protest, a big march against Israel. From that time until now, we are still protesting. This third generation, the main question for us at the beginning was why Muslim world did not develop. Why we are economically underdeveloped, militarily weak, not strong as global powers, or even as Israel. Can you imagine, brothers? In 1967, I was 8 years old. I still remember the news coming from Palestine. Israel has defeated 4 Arab states, Syria, Egypt, Jordan, and Lebanon in 6 days. In 6 days only. Now, 1 year passed, they were not able to defeat with a huge technology, with a tiny, not state, population, people, without any organized army. So in those days, when I went to a high school, my high school was a German high school. My religious education was absolutely private religious education. I had some private courses, Arabic courses, fiqh, kalam, and many other courses by myself through some madrasa scholars. Then when I went to German high school, it was a shock for me regarding my identity. I was a Muslim. I was a Turkish. The teachers were all from Second World War German army or German society. So that was my first encounter and challenge with Western civilization. My feelings, my values from the family, and my teachings from the German high school. And I start to read German classics, Western classics, parallel to Islamic classics. So therefore, beyond the general characteristics of my generation, my personal adventure started when I was 10, 9, 11 years old. Then I asked questions. And those 1970s in Turkey, in Malaysia, everywhere, there was a huge ideological polarization. Leftist, rightist, Islamist. In fact, the Islamic movements, what we call today, many of them went back as the sources to those years. I am sure Brother Anwar Ibrahim, who is my very close friend, he had almost similar experiences in those years. First time, then I start to think, what should I write? My choice of profession was clear. I said, I want to be scholar. I want to be academics. My father was a businessman, but I didn't continue as businessman because I had huge questions in my mind. Why Turkey, as the global power of 16th century, 17th century, 18th century, controlled almost all civilizational access, now is so underdeveloped. Marxists in Turkey, they went back to economic resources. We went back to philosophical questions, but the questions was these. In 1977, first time I went to London, and that was a very interesting, shocking experience for me. It was the year when the London Central Mosque was opened. So I was immediately before Iranian Revolution. I participated several demonstrations supporting Iranian Revolution, supporting jihad in Afghanistan, and the emergence of Islamic spirit from Afghanistan, from everywhere. That is this last quarter of 20th century. Last quarter of 20th century was the rise of this Islamic common destiny feeling, let me say. And my university was originally an American college, American university. So my family background was purely Islamic, traditional community, traditional Islamic studies through traditional ways. My high school was German high school. My university was an American college, American University, Bosphorus University. So that big challenge of Islam and West, how can we identify this? Why did we have such a historical defeat by the West? So first I started in business administration, but to be frank, I don't know whether there are any business business students there. I said business administration is not a science, it is a skill. And I decided to study economics. And then I realized, I said, no, economics alone cannot answer my questions. So I made double major with politics. And on my own, I start to make certain researches and my own private, let me say, intellectual training by myself. In 1983, I participated to a world tour of a youth by an organization in US. And when I was 1924, I visited all big civilizational centers. Jerusalem, first time I prayed in Masjid al-Aqsa in 1983. Jerusalem, Rome, Delhi, Nepal, Kathmandu, Beijing, when during China communist era, I was in Beijing. So that was for me a big experience, and I studied comparative religions. First time I read Tao, Confucius, and others there. Then the question in MA, my main analysis was on a comparative analysis between British and French colonialism in the Muslim world as a comparison of India and Algeria. I cannot see Okay. India and Algeria. But afterwards, I start to think differently. After observing these different civilizational centers all over the world, I came back, I said, the main question is not economic development or underdevelopment. The main question is not political defeat. The main question is directly related to the mentality, to the mentality, to intellectual questions. Without redefining intellectual challenge of the West and modernity, we cannot overcome the questions of economic underdevelopment or political defeat. Let me make a short analysis, which in my books I made in distance, and I will come to that point about historical background of the Islamic civilization. Islamic civilization had three big challenges throughout the centuries. One was Crusaders, a military challenge. And it took almost 2 centuries, but at the end of the day, we defeated them. The second one was Mongols. An invasion destroyed Baghdad, destroyed all the big cities of Islamic civilization, but at the end of the day, they were assimilated by Islamic society, and after Mongols, there were big Islamic states. 16th century was a century of Islamic civilization's dominance, from Vienna up to China. Ottoman state, Safavids, Baburs, in Mughals in India. So all the main continent, it was under Muslim control. The third biggest challenge is still continuing Western challenge of modernity. So it was not a problem of pre-capitalism and capitalism only. It was not a problem of colonialism. Colonialism is a political concept, but in fact, it is a mental colonialism is worse than political colonialism. So how can we purify our mentality? How can we look from a new intellectual perspective? That became my main question in 1983-84. So I changed the focus of my analysis from political colonialism to mental colonialism to intellectual colonialism. And therefore, this is the source of alternative paradigms. You know what happened? In 1984, 83, 84, I wrote several papers on this concept. How can we compare Western paradigm and Islamic paradigm? And main question, I said, what is the difference between a Muslim and a Western? What is the difference between a political Muslim politics and Western politics? How can we say, for example, Ibn Rushd and Imam Ghazali, they were different schools of philosophy in Islamic civilization, but they are all Islamic philosophy at the end of the day. They refuted themselves. They made critics of them. Tahafetul Falasife. But at the end of the day, Ibn Sina, Ghazali, Ibn Rushd, Al-Kindi, Farabi, different schools, we call them Islamic. While the Thomas Aquinas, who was influenced by Ghazali and Ibn Rushd and Ibn Maymun, one is Jewish, the other one is Christian. They are part of Islamic, part of the Western paradigm. And I asked this question, and I tried to make a differentiation which unites Islamic philosophers and unites Western philosophers and differentiates them from each other. In Islamic philosophy, as you know, there are three trends: philosophy, kalam, and tasawwuf. They had different approaches. But at the end of the day, what is the common paradigm? And I said the common paradigm is the tawhidic understanding, and the Islamic revolution, the essence, the ultimate essence of Islamic civilization is ontological unity, tawhid. And I developed a concept. In fact, not before my thesis, there was not such a concept. I tried to bring Western paganism, Roman paganism, Greek philosophy, Christianity, and modernity as a continuity of a paradigm, and I developed a concept, ontological proximity, which means at the end of this is the question of being. At the beginning, I said being, time, and space. So as being, who am I? And I said the identity, there is a difference. Identity cannot solve this question because identity could be given by a political authority. You are Malaysian citizen. We are Turkish citizen. But 100 years ago, or 150 years ago, there was not Turkish Republic. We were Ottoman. You were Indo-Malay, Malay, but not Malaysian, or maybe Selangori or Johari. So identity might change. I said identity cannot solve my concept, my main question, because transcendental unity of Muslims is beyond identity. And I developed a concept, self-perception. So the identity could be given, but self-perception cannot be given. Basically, this is from phenomenology of Edmund Husserl's self-verständnis. But I reformulated this as a self-perception. And I said the revolution of Islamic civilization, I say revolution, not an ordinary change, not a change, not a reform. A revolution emerged in the history with Prophet ﷺ as a challenge to all civilizational entities until his time. In India, there was a caste system from Aryan culture, and the ontological self-perception of a high caste and lower caste, Vaishya and Brahma, they had different ontological self-perceptions within the same civilizations. Or in Greeks, citizens and slaves, or in China, several caste systems, etc. I said the main Islamic revolution was ontological equality of human beings, ontological equality, absolute equality of human beings in his or her relation with God and nature. So in ontological hierarchy, God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, human beings and nature is so clear. We do not accept any ontological proximity, because if you assume an ontological proximity, at the end of the day, those who have this proximity will have a higher ontological status than the others. For example, for us, ontologically, we are equal to Prophet ﷺ. He's a human being. According to Quran, he is a Rasul, but a human being. But Jesus, in Christian theology as the Trinity, is not human being. He is God. Ontological proximity is so high that there is no clear separation, ontological separation between Jesus and God. But there is such a clear ontological differentiation between Prophet ﷺ and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is so important, because historically important, because after Jesus, St. Paul, although he didn't see even once Jesus, he is the founder of Christian theology, while Abu Bakr, as the predecessor, I mean who continued the tradition, the basic transformation of Christianity started immediately. I will come to that point later about history after Jesus. But the most critical time of Islamic history was when Prophet died and Abu Bakr radiallahu anh took the power. He said, I am an ordinary human. He has lived with the Prophet. So this prevented ontological proximity, St. Paul and St. Peter. But the church then became an ontological, buffer institution between God and humanity. And Pope is not an ordinary human being as the representative of Jesus. So I don't want to go into details. So I said, this is the basic difference. And based on this ontological proximity, I analyzed Western paradigm, how this ontological proximity has affected epistemology and the particularization of truth between reason, akl, and Christian dogmas of church. While in Islam, there is no church and there is no such an epistemological particularization. Epistemological unity is important. Then in my alternative paradigms, in this ontological common ground of Islamic philosophers, I almost studied all the main books, classic schools of Islamic thought, just to show how they are united in this ontological hierarchy. And I also analyzed from Greek philosophy to Roman approach, St. Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas, and from 12th century to 15th century, pre-modernity, then modern thought, Erasmus, and all of the continuity up to modern philosophies. So this is how I try to make this comparison. And my book focused on this. I said, value, the being, knowledge, and value. This is a mentality formation, how you perceive your being, how you use your knowledge, your akal, your source, and how you develop this to a lifestyle as values. And then I said, value being knowledge value connected to law, politics, and economics. So I changed the Marxist hierarchy, just the opposite. First, mental transformation comes, then material transformation is an outcome of this mental transformation. This is basically alternative paradigms. How do I perceive myself? It is very interesting. Why did I come to Malaysia? Now I will come to history more. Why did I come to Malaysia? You know, it was for me not an ordinary decision. It was a very decisive point, but also it was my destiny. You know, in 1990, when I finished my PhD, submitted, 1990 June, I submitted. March, I received an invitation from Georgetown University because of my article, which was published before my thesis. They invited me for postdoctoral study and a position in Washington, Georgetown University. And I was thinking, I didn't have such an ambition to go to United States or West, because I had my education in an American, basically American and German institutions. My concept of civilization did emerge out of these. Civilization is an entity of being, time and space, like a triangle. The essence is being, the concept of being. The historical emergence is space. The space is where these civilizations did emerge, and historical continuity is time. So I had chance to know enough information from inside on Western civilization. Interestingly, when I was preparing even to go to West, even in 1983, I received another invitation, another PhD scholarship from United States, but I didn't go because, as I said, I wanted to make more study on Islamic civilization, I went to Egypt, to Jordan, to spend there for a year in 1980s. So after that, interestingly, one of my friends came to Turkey from US who completed his PhD, Tahir Ayar. Some of UIA students may know him. He said he's going to Malaysia and he knew my articles, my works. There is a university being established there, IIUM. Can you come and teach there? And he took my article to Malaysia, my works, and in 1 month time, less than 1 month time, in July, I received an invitation from Malaysia that an original university is being established.
Dr. Ahmet, Dr. Ahmet line, I think. So we'll be waiting for Dr. Ahmet.
Yes, we should wait.
It's okay.
Sort of, yeah, he
Yeah.
has.
His line. Okay. Sorry, Dr. Ahmet.
There was an internet problem here.
Yeah. It's okay. Inshallah. You continue.
I came to Malaysia to study Chinese, Islamic, and Indian religious traditions, as well as Western interaction with all these traditions at the same time. It was a very wise decision when I look from today. I purposefully rented a house in a Chinese neighborhood. I taught in a Muslim institution. UIA is my very esteemed university, and I still remember all my good memories in the university. The day before yesterday, Professor Anis Ahmed from Pakistan was my guest here. We remembered our unforgettable memories of Malaysia. So I became a Malaysian. And I participated to almost all Indian festivals, Thaipusam, Deepavali. So I was able to see Chinese and Indian civilizations at the same time. And I also drafted the department's curricula, and I had extraordinary experience in political sense. For example, with my presence there, and Brother Enver Ibrahim was Minister of Education. With a plan, we brought hundreds of students from Bosnia, from Uzbekistan, from Azerbaijan, from Chechnya, from Albania after the Cold War. It was also for me a practical experience. I had chance to have contacts with African Muslim intellectuals like Malik Bedri, who passed away, or Pakistani Indian intellectual. Of course, my dear friend, Professor Kamal Hassan, a great intellectuals. In those years, Malaysia and UAE became like an intellectual center of the Muslim world. Almost all well-known scholars were there. I was a young academician, but we formed a community. You can see the successes and failures of the Muslim world at the same time. Of course, we had a very small campus at that time. Now UAE is a huge campus, alhamdulillah. I hope the same success story continues. From Bosnia, we received, it was great honor for me. I have chosen, in my department, I had 9 Bosnian students specially trained in 1991 when there was Bosnian War. In 2009, when I became Foreign Minister of Turkey, 7, 8 of them were ambassadors of Bosnia in different countries. So this was an intellectual and practical experience. Meanwhile, Cold War has ended. Now come to history. Fukuyama wrote an article, History Has Ended, The End of History, in 1989. I wrote a critical article against these. And I said, this is Alternative Paradigms, the first version. And I said, history did not end. In 1991, in a big annual conference of political scientists, ISA conference in Canada, I submitted a paper, Civilizational Transformation. I said, this is not the end of history. This is civilizational transformation of humanity. And it is not success of liberalism or capitalism. It is the end of the modern paradigm. There is a new paradigm emerging in which there will be interaction of different civilizations, Chinese, Indian, Muslim, African, Latin American civilizations. They will interact. And technology is changing. Once technology is changing in a such speed, you cannot stop the history. This was my main approach, and I wrote a critic, and that became my book in 1994, this civilization transformation. I said the main problem is not the collapse of Soviet system, but the main problem is the collapse of Western paradigm as a modern paradigm, and there will be a new history. And I said, history will not end, history will be accelerated. So we have to be ready for a much more comprehensive challenges in front of us. This was in 1991. So, and I used this concept of civilizational transformation to history and geography. Now, from alternative paradigms, based on Islamic paradigm, based on ontological proximity, ontological hierarchy versus proximity, to historical paradigm, where the end of unipolar Western civilizational era. I defended multipolar civilizational interaction. In 1994, Huntington wrote Clash of Civilizations. I wrote a critique of it, published in 2-3 journals. And in UIA, one of them is in UIA. That was the idea. Against him, I said, there will be no civilization, clash of civilizations, but civilizational interaction. There will be no line of civilizations in coming decades, because civilizations will interact. There will be more Muslims in Western societies. There will be more refugee flows, etc. But at the end of the day, he blamed on Islamic civilization as where the borders of Islam was shaped by blood, he said. And he proposed the American strategist that America, US should provocate conflicts between Islamic and Chinese civilization and make strategic hegemony on the zone of Islamic civilization. So I don't want to go into details. I harshly criticize these. I wrote several articles and books on these. I said, this is wrong. Civilization is not a concept of clash. Civilization is a concept of coexistence and interaction. Then I wrote another article on civilizational self-perception. Self-perception is personal, but if it becomes a collective self-perception, if it based on a collective memory, then it has been transformed to a civilizational self-perception. What is common between a Malay and Turkish Muslim? Ethnicity different, language different, but there are so many common things. While we don't have that commonality with some Turco origin Magyars, Hungarians. Interesting experience, let me say, for you. In 1990, when I came to Malaysia, there was a holiday after 1 month. And I asked my dear friend, Professor Kemal Hassan, I said, Professor, I want to observe Malay culture from inside. So I want to spend these 3-4 days in the most traditional Malay cities or towns or regions. Where do you want me to suggest to go? He said, you should go to Kelantan and Terengganu. And I went to Terengganu, then Kelantan. I gave lectures in Kuza. At that time, it was Kuznawi University, with my 2 daughters, small daughters, 3-5 years old. Then I went to Kelantan. There was a very respected scholar, Muhammad Osmani. He invited me to a halakha, but many brothers in those days in Kelantan, they didn't know English or Arabic. So they were making the halakha in Malay. Of course, I didn't know Malay. And the host was always apologizing me. So we are making the course in Malay. Sorry, I hope it is not boring. I said, don't worry, I am following. After a while, he again insisted and asked questions. I said, don't worry, I am following. Then he said, how can you follow? You don't know Malay. I said, can I summarize so that you will be relaxed? He said, yes. And I said, this is the subject. This brother said so, this said so. He was against him. He defended this argument. They were shocked. I said, look, brother, Arabic is not language of a nation. This is a Quranic verses which I know. It is a language of all Muslim societies. So from those concepts, I pick up the concepts, Arabic, and some of your words are from English, sekolah. I took this concept as well. Then I deconnect them and I look at your biological language, who is against whom, so I can at least follow. Don't worry. How come a Turkish who participated in Ahlaka could follow a course, at least as a summary? Because of our common heritage of Quran, of our common heritage of self-perception, how a Muslim approaches a Malay or Turkish Muslim doesn't differ. Similarly, now come to history. I hope we identified the being, self-perception of alternative paradigms. Second is history. In my course, I don't know whether there is any student of mine in this. Zekai was there maybe. Still, I admire with my students because they established a WhatsApp group, alumni, UIA, with my picture as the profile picture. We have a WhatsApp group. We are still, after 35 years, we are still contacted to each other. I was asked to teach history of political thought. When I came to when I entered the classroom, it was like a United Nations. There were Malays, of course. There were Muslims from different continents, Afghani, Indian, Pakistani, even from El Salvador. Basurto, a student, was from El Salvador, African, Turkish, all different type of students. And even a Chinese student, Farkim Bang. My textbook, brothers and sisters, my textbook was based on a Western paradigm. Starts with Greeks, continue with Romans, and Christianity and modernity. As if all the history of humanity flowed in Europe. In fact, when there was a Chinese state, there was not even city in Europe. When Baghdad was the metropolitan of 10th century, Paris was a small village. When Istanbul was the biggest city in 16th century, there was not single European city in the top 10 cities of the world. The first biggest city was Istanbul, the second one was Beijing, the third one was Cairo. So I thought this is mental colonialization. And I didn't show the textbook. I myself, I prepared a new curriculum starting from Chinese, Indian, Iranian, ancient culture, Greek philosophy, then Islamic philosophy, then modern Western philosophy, modern Muslim thought, modern Chinese thought. So if I taught the textbook which I brought to the classroom, it would mean for a Muslim that we are not part of history. History means European history. Being means European. Humanity means European humanity. So this was a shocking experience for me. And I tried to develop a new understanding of time. Time means you are living in a time period. After 30 years, God knows, I will not be in the world. You will be there, of course, but time will continue. How do you perceive your time? The perception of time is historical consciousness. Therefore, I decided to write a book, Historical Depth. Philosophical depth is alternative paradigms. Historical depth is this historical consciousness based on this civilizational interaction. I said in several articles, my articles, I said the first big civilizational interaction was during the time of Alexander the Great, based on the philosophical transformation of before Christ, 6th to 4th century, Aristo and Plato in Greek, Zoroastrian in Persian, Jain and Buddha in India, Taoism and Confucius in China. So all the mainland of Eurasia, there was a historical philosophical transformation of history. Then, based on this philosophical transformation, big traditions came out, political traditions. One based on Greek Mediterranean transformation, Alexander the Great, on Zoroastrian Persian tradition. In India, after Buddhist in 2nd century, 1st century, the biggest Buddhist empire of Asoka. Then in China, Chinese Han Dynasty. So philosophical transformation has been followed by historical and political transformation. What is about Islamic civilization here? Islamic civilization is a very interesting case. In my history of Islamic seer and Islamic history lectures, I made a comparison. Why Christianity and Judaism has been transformed, has been deformed. In fact, not only transformed, but deformed, and not Islam. Why Tawhidic tradition continued, while the same Tawhidic tradition of Isa alayhi salam has been transformed to a Christian theology of Trinity. Why, to be frank, in my experience, I thought even Buddha might be a prophet. Some Muslim scholars in India said this might be a reference to Buddha. Anyway, Allah knows the best. But it has been transformed through a ontological proximity to a pantheistic approach. Now, what is the difference of Islam? Islam did emerge in a very, like I call it, incubator, historical incubator. Mecca and Medina was an isolated area. It was not like Egypt. So in the world, you have several Anatolian civilizations, Mesopotamian civilization, Indian civilization, Indo subcontinent civilization, Iranian civilization. Islam did emerge not in the center of these civilizations. For example, Jesus was in Jerusalem. Jerusalem was under Roman Empire. Roman Empire was a big civilizational entity, and there was a Jewish tradition of monotheism. And Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, made his teaching in such an environment. And he did not have a chance to have any social practice of Christianity. Only 13 Havariyun. Then the next comers, the next generation of Christianity, they were products of this civilization climate. And Christianity has been transformed by the influence of Greek philosophy and Roman paganism. And the Roman pagan gods and the Christian sense, you have a continuation of this mythology and Christianity. While in Islam, the difference is this. Islam did emerge in an isolated area, incubator, as if it is prepared for Islam. No direct influence by any other civilization. So the pure tawhidic tradition did emerge. And Prophet ﷺ is the only political or religious personality in history who brought a new self-perception, who taught this to other people, and who established a political order in Medina. Look, for example, Musa alayhi salam was a prophet, but he was not a leader, a political or a leader established a political order. From Egypt, he came to Palestine, passed away, but was not a political leader. While Dawood alayhi salam or Sulaiman alayhi salam, they had the philosophical transformation has been completed. They were political leaders. Political order was established by them, but they didn't make this philosophical transformation. They based on Musa alayhi salam. But Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he was a human being with his own self-perception. He formed a community in Mecca under oppression. He taught this community. Then he formed a society in Medina, a political economic order in Medina, market of Medina, a political order in Medina, Medinan covenant. And then based on these, 4 caliphs made this divine politics into a human politics by Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. Then in the second half of the 1st century, it spread to Egypt, to Iraq, to Syria, to Jerusalem. That civilizational interaction did emerge after the basic teachings of Islam has been formed. And I say the second biggest transformation after this, before Christ, 4th to 6th to 4th century before Christ, the second biggest transformation did emerge until Islamic civilization, because Islamic teaching established political orders, economic orders, cities. Cities are very important. I have a book on cities recently published by Routledge. Cities were established by Islamic teachings or transformed. Baghdad was established by Muslims, but Jerusalem has been transformed as an Islamic city. Istanbul has been transformed an Islamic city. So this is the difference of Islamic civilization. My sense of, as a Muslim in Istanbul, my own historical consciousness did emerge in Istanbul, where it was a city of 3 big empires, capital of 3 big empires, and the last capital of Islamic civilization as a whole. So my Muslim perception of Islam has been affected by all of these. Meanwhile, I have to mention one important thing which I forgot. During this intellectual adventure, we established with my friends in 1985, almost 10, 15 friends, we established a foundation for science and arts when I was 26 years old. We developed a new educational paradigm there. How should we analyze this civilizational interaction? And this institution became the pioneer intellectual institution in Turkey in 1990s. Almost all important intellectual leaders, political leaders, we were able to train there. They interacted in that institution. Later, we established Shahir University based on this tradition. So Then in 2019, after I came back from Malaysia, this institution we transformed, and we made this institution the pioneer institution of intellectual transformation. And my idea there, in 1983, I wrote a paper published by Brismas in London, transformation from intellectual to alim tradition, from alim to intellectual tradition. My proposition was, ilm as an epistemological concept was the basic premise of Islamic teaching, and alim as an intellectual prototype, a scholarly prototype, was the most important discovery, the most important success of Islamic civilization. And in 19th century, this alim tradition has been transformed to intellectual tradition of Western paradigm. So we had scholars, Muslims, fuqaha, mutakallim, and intellectuals, a clash. I said this should be reintegrated, epistemological reintegration. And the purpose of this Foundation for Science and Arts was epistemological reintegration. Here in this room, I see Selami, Zekai, Sevinç. Many of them were my students in 1990s. It was an intellectual revolution. And at the same time, there was a huge secular radicalization in Turkey. A coup d'etat did occur in 1997. All of us were affected. Then this is historical perception. Islamic civilization, three big challenges: Mongols, Crusaders, Mongols, and Western civilization challenge continue. The third is space, geography. From philosophical depth to historical depth, from historical depth to geographical depth, strategy, geostrategy, geoculture. When Huntington wrote his article, Clash of Civilization, he said all of the big crises are in the Muslim lands, Bosnia and many others. So Islam is the main responsible civilization for all these, because the Islam is clashing with West, with Chinese, with Indians, etc. So he blamed on Islamic civilization as the source of crisis. I said, of course, harshly criticized this, and I gave him two facts. I said, this is wrong assumption. Why? Because these crises did emerge, many of these crises in the Muslim lands, not because of Islamic teachings, because of the geopolitical position of Muslim societies. There are 18 sea routes on Earth. 9 of them are strategically highest points of the world, and 8 of them are in the Muslim lands: Bosporus, Dardanelles, Suez Channel, Aden, Malacca. All these straits are in Muslim lands. So one day, if Muslims decide to stop the world trade, they can do it. So the mainland of Afro-Eurasia are in the hands of Muslim societies. Therefore, clash is not a civilization clash, it's geopolitical clash. Western colonialism, global powers, they want to dominate these sea roads. They want to dominate energy resources. And energy resources and sea roads, they are all in the Muslim lands. This is the reason why all these political confrontations are in Muslim lands. And based on this, I developed this strategic depth theory, especially after this coup d'etat in Turkey, 1997, against pro-Islamic Prime Minister Necmettin Erbakan. There was a huge pressure on Muslims. And I wrote an article, a book. I decided to write a book to redefine Turkish geopolitical position. And there I developed a strategic approach, assuming Turkey as a country and Islamic civilization as a belt of geopolitical picture of the world as the center of geopolitics. Not Rimland, but central geopolitics, central country of center, Afro-Euro-Asian center. And this book did appear in 2001 as a new approach to geography, to space, against colonialism, against imperialism, reinterpretation of Muslim geographies, especially Turkish geography. It was, and let me say, I don't want to be humble here, but like an intellectual revolution, in Turkey, usually academic books, you can publish 1 edition, 2 edition. In 1 year, it made 20, 25 edition printings. And almost, although they prevented my courses or my position in several universities, military invited me to military academy to teach them on geopolitics. And before I became chief advisor, this book became the main reference book of Turkish strategy. Then there was a change of government. I became chief advisor. Unfortunately, I did not allow my book to be translated in English because I said, I am a state officer. I am the chief advisor of Prime Minister. We are a new government. And in my book, Strategic Depth, I analyze and I made certain political suggestions for the leaders. That became the central position. I mean, the Turkish strategy. So I didn't want this to be known because I am now not an ordinary independent academician. I am chief advisor who is defining Turkish strategy. But it has been translated to 15 languages almost. 2 years ago, it has been translated to Japanese as well. I have an English translation now. I prepared last 2-3 years. But now, anyway, it is easy to translate from all languages through these Google translations or artificial intelligence. Then I tried to implement this strategic depth to Turkish foreign policy, to Islamic, to geopolitics. And zero problems with neighbors basically was the main idea against colonialism to minimize problems in the Muslim world, and several mediation attempts. I was mediator in 2009 Gaza War, 2012 Gaza War, 2014 Gaza War, I was mediator. 2012, during Gaza War, when Israel attacked, I was in Gaza, in Shifa Hospital, as foreign minister of Turkey. So in Somalia, when Brother Kani Torun, our ambassador to Somalia, when there was no any foreign presence in Somalia, there was civil war in Somalia, we appointed Kani Torun as Turkish ambassador. He was the only ambassador in Somalia for several years, and he became like Somalian. So Turkish strategy and Turkish image in the world has been improved and increased. In 2014, I became prime minister. Of course, Allah knows the best. We don't know. It created a huge hope among the people in Turkey because I had, alhamdulillah, good credibility in the eyes of the people as an intellectual, as a person who is defending ethics in politics. Meanwhile, some political corruption has started in Turkey, and I acted very decisively against this corruption. I tried to bring, to pass certain laws, political ethics law, tender law, transparency law. I decided to have a very comprehensive ethical revolution in Turkish politics after I won the election in 2015 November with the highest vote in Turkish history of democracy. But unfortunately, you know, power corrupts. Those in my own party who were disturbed by these political reforms, they made a coup inside the party against me to try to limit my power, because many of them were linked to these political corruptions. And I had to resign. I had to make a choice between my principles and my position as prime minister. Throughout of my life, from my primary school time until now, alhamdulillah, my principles are more important than the position. Therefore, in order to be consistent in my heart, in my brain, consistent with my own theories of tawhid, ethics, axiology, precedes politics, normative politics, I decided to resign because of not to be part of this corrupt political environment. For 3 years, 4 years, I followed and I tried to help the government, despite of the fact that they excluded me. But I was blamed by many people because of all these things what happened in the past. But I was silent, not to create any division or any problem in the party. But later, when there was no improvement, when there was spread of corruption, spread of all political practices violating our values, our self-perception, our historical background, I decided to fight back in politics and establish another party. Meanwhile, after my resignation, I wrote 2 English books and 5 Turkish books in different fields. My last book in English was published in 2020, Systemic Earthquake, The Future of World Order, by Cambridge University Press, and City and Civilizations, The Role of Pivot Cities in the History of Civilizations, by Rutledge. So just a short summary at the end. Without having a philosophical, metaphysical depth of self-perception, without understanding Islamic history starting from Siyar al-Nabi until today, even from Adem alayhi salam until today, a new historical approach, you cannot use your geopolitics in proper manner. So my all intellectual effort was trying to establish a connection in my mind between my understanding of being, self-perception, understanding of time as historical consciousness, and understanding of space, geopolitical consciousness. Strategic depth, historical depth, and philosophical depth, they are integrated as a base of a new approach of Islamic paradigm. Meanwhile, the Shahir University, which was established for this purpose, for this intellectual transformation, like UIA in Malaysia, unfortunately, after 10 years, very successful, very successful experience, and became one of the best universities in Turkey. He was banned by the government because of being attached to me. This is unfortunately a huge tragedy for our intellectual environment in Turkey. I hope one day Muslim societies, young generations like you will be able to establish a new paradigm, not only in theory, but in practice, everywhere in the Muslim world, in full consistency between Islamic values and political realities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed, for the introduction, for the long journey of your introduction into from the academic world to the practical world. I would say practical world. So there's a question from the audience today. I think this question is related to your works. So I will begin with the philosophical question first. The first question, there is many thinkers, including among Muslims, when criticizing or questioning the crisis of Western civilization, They will go to the problem of secularism or materialism that underlies their thinking. They also describe there is a clash between the rational enlightenment that acted as the antithesis to the Dark Age. But you give a different conclusion to the problem. What makes you think there is an ideology of ancient wisdom or ancient philosophy that is mystical regarding the problem of existentialism, which you term as ontological proximity, that is inherited from time to time, even though it is different externally? Is there a writing of a certain thinkers that cause you to attribute such a conclusion? I think this is a long question. Maybe you can answer this first.
Yes, yes. First of all, of course, since we had this challenge from Western paradigm, we have to rediscover our identity, rediscover our own civilizational heritage. Therefore, we have to differentiate. Like, La ilaha illallah. First, you will refute something, then you will say the positive things. Now, because of this mental colonialism, first we have to define our own perception. Therefore, we are putting this Western Islamic paradigm as two paradigms. But at the end of the day, we have to admit the fact, I don't mean that Western paradigm is not a paradigm of humanity. It has also realities. It has also certain truths. Because at the end of the day, all the human heritage is one. For example, I can give you, sometimes with this interaction, you develop your own paradigm. If you ask me who is the biggest thinker of the modern Muslim time, who influenced you, I would say Muhammad Iqbal. Muhammad Iqbal is a great thinker, a great philosopher. But what is the difference between Muhammad Iqbal and the madrasa scholars of his time? Because Muhammad Iqbal had to interact with Hegelian philosophy. So nothing on earth or in human history did emerge in a vacuum. For example, sometimes I ask myself, if I was trained in a very traditional way only, I wouldn't have so many questions in my mind. Since I encountered with German teachers, I wrote Kafka when I was 13, 14 years old. Similarly, Hegel, Kant. So exactly the same way, the first Muslim philosophers, the first Muslim fuqaha, why did Islamic law emerge in Iraq, but not in Medina? In Medina, we have Islamic law, of course. But why Imam Hanafi was more influential than Imam Malik at these critical stages? Because he lived in a more sophisticated economic environment. Imam Shafi, same environment. So that develops human encounter. Iraq was an agrarian society. Similarly, philosophy, Farabi is a great thinker. Why? Because he studied Aristotle, Plato. You cannot develop yourself. Although I said Western and Islamic paradigm, I never accept any approach that Muslim history of philosophy did emerge in a purely isolated environment. And I am also against those who say all Western things are wrong. No, the original contribution and character of Islamic civilization, you can differentiate from others. But then you have to rewrite, you have to reconnect these philosophies. Like Ibn Rushd, our West, his student Ibn Maimonides, has transformed Jewish history, Jewish mysticism, Jewish thought could not be understood without Ibn Maymun. But Ibn Maymun was student of Ibn Rushd. Similarly, Averroes, similarly, St. Thomas Aquinas. If there was no influence by Imam Ghazali or by Ibn Rushd, Thomas Aquinas wouldn't be so influential. Why I am saying this? From ancient times today, there is always a wisdom of humanity, what we call hikmah. Hikmah belongs to all humanity. You can, but you have to, in Kalam we say tanzih. You have to, when you encounter with an ancient mystic tradition, you have to be sure that there are certain correct truth elements in this ancient philosophy, because it is also a human heritage. But if you should not act like the first century of Tertullian or Roman Empire, Roman Catholicism, you have to differentiate with pagan elements who could negatively affect your tawhidic understanding, but at the same time, you have to know them and you have to get interaction. It was shocking for Christians, you know. Let me say this. When I was foreign minister, I think I was the first Turkish foreign minister who visited Vatican without visiting Italy. I mean, of course, we went to Rome, but usually Vatican is another state. So I wanted to go bilateral relation to Vatican. They opened my in Vatican. We went down to the grave of Saint Peter. Okay, and they were shocked. I start to pray, recite Fatiha. The priests were shocked. They said, "How come he's Christian?" I said, "No. For me, until Prophet ﷺ, all Christians are Muslims, because that was the last religion. Allah knows who is best, who is worst. But for me, he was persecuted by pagans, by unbelievers. He is an Ahli Kitab. And before Ashab Kahf or many others, before Prophet ﷺ, Islam is not only after Prophet ﷺ. Islam is from Adam ﷺ until today. From shamanism of Turkish tradition, there are certain elements which are very consistent with monotheism. But you, as an intellectual transformation, you have to make this judgment. Who can contribute to Tawhidic paradigm positively, or how you can assimilate, internalize these ancient tradition. But if you just become slave, or I mean, accept those and change your own Tawhidic paradigm, then Islam will be deformed like Christianity. This is the balance where we have to act. Also, secularism. I wrote an article, let me see if, yes, by John Esposito. In this book, I wrote an article on secularism. Let me read. Philosophical and institutional dimension of secularization, a comparative analysis. How secular tradition in West and Islamic teaching could be compared. So our secularism, our experience in secularism, unfortunately, in many Muslim lands, are irrational secularism, dogmatic secularism, based on the Enlightenment philosophy. Otherwise, the philosophical teachings of Islam, of modern teachings today, let me finish with this. You know, after Gaza war in last year, of course, I was not in official position, but I, as an intellectual, as a former prime minister, I contacted with all the former prime ministers, and we formed, and also intellectuals, Nobel Prize winners, many of them, 139 intellectuals, we formed a group of global conscious initiative. And in our first meeting, there were secular Jews, there were secular Christians, socialists, atheists, Muslims, all of them. But the purpose was how we defend values of humanity in Gaza. we were discussing on the concept of genocide, whether we can use it or not. Some Muslims were saying that in the early weeks of months of this genocide, maybe it is better not to use genocide, but use ethnic cleansing so that it will not be, it will be accepted by all. Some Jewish might be disturbed with these, some positive Jewish. One Jewish academician, Phyllis Bennis, very well-known academician, she took the floor and she said, I am a Jewish girl. I mean, from a Jewish family, but she's now, I think, 70s or 80s, very, very well-known. She said, for me, this is a genocide, what Israel is committing. Therefore, if you are reluctant to use genocide, I will not sign the declaration. You must say this is genocide. So some Muslims were reluctant. A secular Jewish lady was insisting to use genocide. So here, please don't misunderstand me. My separation of these two paradigms does not mean that Islam is different from all the other human tradition. The opposite. Islam is the continuation of human tradition. And today we have to interpret Islamic paradigm and Islamic heritage based on the unity of humanity.
Thank you very much. There's a second question. In your book, Alternative Paradigm, you describe the Islamic paradigm of tawhid as an ontologically determined epistemology, suggesting that ontology influenced the trajectory of epistemology. Could this relationship also be the other way around, where epistemology in turn shapes ontology? Specifically, can our understanding of ontology, such as belief in Allah, be examined and influenced by epistemological principles concerning truth, methods of knowledge acquisition, and validation?
Yeah. Here, what I mean, if you read that part of my book with the Western paradigm parallel, I want to show the difference between Islamic and Western paradigm. I don't say that ontology is not being affected by epistemology, but the epistemological premises are based on ontological presuppositions, while in the West, the opposite. For example, the pure understanding of Christian theology of St. Peter, I don't say St. Paul, after 2 centuries, 3 centuries, have been transformed by this new epistemology of Greek philosophy or Roman paganism. While Islam, if you, for example, Wahi, if you say Wahi revelation is defining our ontology, but in order to define a knowledge as revelation, you have to believe in God. You know, if you don't, those who do not believe in God, they do not see Wahi or revelation as a source of knowledge. This is not a vicious circle. For example, my understanding, if you ask me what is the main religious teaching, what is the main influence in your religious approach, feeling inside, I would say Esmaul Husna. My high school was German and full of Marxists. I was the only one who was praying. And then a group of 5, 6 brothers, at most 10 out of hundreds of students. I could have been a Marxist or a liberal or an atheist, because all the teachings, it was not madrasa. But what is the difference? When I ask, who am I? Then the second question, my self-perception, why did I become a committed Muslim? I try to become, of course. Allah knows who is committed, who is not. But Esmaül Husna. Without understanding Esmaül Husna, you can say yes, but Esmaül Husna is an epistemological essence from Quran, yes, but in order to get benefited from Quran, you have to accept that Quran is a revelation of God, and you have to accept first God. So, but in the West, the historical formation was the opposite, not only individually. For example, people say three schools, and Muhyiddin Arabi, Wahdeti Vücud. I say Wahdeti Vücud is different than pantheism. Okay? Why Wahdeti Vücud is different than pantheism? Because, yes, it looks like pantheism, but because pantheism is the ultimate version of polytheism. Pantheism did emerge in the West as the ultimate version of polytheism. Human beings looked, this mountain is God, this river is God, this stone is God. Then afterwards, all the nature has been deified. So pantheism, polytheism, and materialism, they had an imagination of continuity. While in Islam, Muhyiddin Arabi, first he embraced tawhid, then he tried to interpret tawhid through seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's influence everywhere in the world. This is two different ways. And therefore, I don't see, I am an admirer, mainly I follow in my alternative paradigms, I am sure you realized, between tajsim and abstraction, tajsim and tanzih of God. Ghazali has created an optimal way through his philosophy. I'm an admirer of Ghazali, but I do not exclude Muhyiddin al-Arabi. Or it doesn't mean I do not respect Ibn Rushd. All of them tried to defend tawhid, belief of tawhid in different conceptual and imaginative frameworks. Therefore, in the West, when you say philosophy, theology, mysticism, in Islam we have falasife, kalam, and tasawwuf. But why do we say, for example, San Assisi as Western mystic and Ibn Arabi as Muslim mystic? They are not in the same paradigm, but we have different because of this. That's what I try to say. And in order to understand, for example, if you read Leibniz and Islamic Ash'ari school of atomic, the cosmological understanding, they look similar, but the consequences are different. Okay?
All right, it's very long and precise answer. Then we can understand your books. I think maybe you are chasing your time, Dr. Ahmet. You have time?
Yes. Okay. A question from sisters.
Okay, maybe this is the last question from sisters. In your book, Strategic Death, why do you consider history a resource for building a nation's power? Additionally, when you mention will in the context of a nation's development, are you referring to political will or the collective will of the nation? What is the concept of will according to your framework?
I don't know whether you read my book, Strategic Depth. In my book, Strategic Depth, maybe the most important contribution many people referred was a formula of power. I tried to make a mathematical equation. Meanwhile, I want to say, since you are young generation, my methodology I wish one day my book, which I wrote for youth, 600 pages, published in 2017, on the how I had some conversations with a young person about the methodology, science, knowledge, the difference between information knowledge and consciousness, etc. The methodology, I am against very dogmatic disciplinary approach. You have to be multidisciplinary. So usually you'll say, I am an engineer, mathematics is important, physics is important, biology is important. I am a political scientist or historian. Oh, they are less important, but the verbal or vocabulary or theoretization is important, philosophy is important. No. Without mathematics, you cannot solve anything. Mathematics is the beginning of abstraction. In my book, political will is a multiplier. In the book, there is a formula. I wish to be in Malaysia with you to write it down. In that formula, there are certain things which are additional. There are certain things which multiply the performance of nations. One of the multiplier of the performance of nation, it is a mathematical formula. Let me try to show it, if I can. Anyway, here. Look, do you see this? I don't know. Look,
Yes, yes,
here
yes,
is
yes.
the formula. Yes, here is the formula.
We translate it from Arabic. The
Okay.
formula.
I will send it to you in English version. So in this formula, there are certain things which are positively affected, like space, population, culture, economy, etc. But even if you have all these positive assets, if you do not have two things, you cannot multiply it. One is political will, the other one is strategic mentality. Assume that the Arab countries, I don't want to give name, but let's say Saudi Arabia or Qatar or Emirates, they have all these potentials. They have geography, huge, big geography. They have economic resources. But they don't have strong political will. Therefore, a small Israel is challenging them and defeating them. Strategic will and political power. Political will and strategic mentality. Political will, both of things. Don't think that a political individual will emerge suddenly like a prophetic way. An individual will be only an outcome of a collective will. If there is a climate, political climate, where this individual will can emerge, then that will be sustainable will. Otherwise, a political leader will come, will create a success, then again, that nation will collapse. The more important thing is not individual or collective, but institutional will. Institutional will means it is surviving. It is beyond individual performance. Individual performance is important, but institutional and collective institutional performance based on collective will is more important than anything else.
MashaAllah. There's a fourth question by the sisters. Who or what will safeguard the core values, the 5 I's, inclusiveness, internal consistency, the interest optimization, implementation of power, institutionalization in the concept of the inclusive global order that you introduced? How can this value help restore the rights of the Ummah, for example, the liberation of Palestine and Al-Aqsa from Zionist occupation?
MashaAllah. I am so happy you read all of my books. I understand the conceptualization. Great. Five eyes, that's important for for international order. If you ask me which one is important, for example, in the Muslim lands, inclusiveness. We have problems, almost all Muslim societies, problems of inclusiveness. For example, in Syria, there was a huge, very destructive war because Syrian regime was based on a sectarian character. They excluded Kurds and Sunni Arabs. When colonialism left the countries, they divided the society. Usually they gave the power to the minorities. French colonialism, when they left Syria and Lebanon, they gave the power to minority Alevite, Arab Alevites, Syria, Nusayri, what we call. 15% of Nusayri controls the country. 85% Sunnis, they didn't have any high position in the system. And Kurds are excluded. Now, Syria, how can be a success story with this exclusive character? I visited Syria more than 50 times, and I had good relations with President Bashar al-Assad. But when these civil tensions started, Syrian army became a sectarian army, and they attacked Halep, they attacked Hama, Homs. Similarly, in Iraq, practically divided into three: Shiite Iraq, Sunni Iraq, Kurdish Iraq, etc. In many Muslim societies, we have this. Inclusivity is the source of power. And also institutional character. For example, Palestine. In 1991, Palestinian Authority has been formed, but because of the absence of institutions, Palestinian Authority has been weakened, became corrupt, and Hamas did emerge as a reaction. And since Hamas controlled Gaza, Palestine has been divided into two. And they were not able to unite these for the last 16 years. And Western countries did not respect the Palestinian election in 2006, since Hamas won the election. So this is all these elements which I mentioned, five eyes, are absent in Muslim societies. When they are present or when they are strengthened, suddenly that power becomes stronger. Like in Turkey, when we came to power in 2003, all of these five eyes were very weak. Later, we have strengthened them, and Turkey became a rising star. But in last 8 years, similar mistakes have been committed like before, and some because of the alliance of AK Party with ultra-nationalist circles. Again, some exclusivist policies started, polarizing policies started, and Turkish role has been weakened. Therefore, all Muslim nation states must reform themselves based on these principles. Then OIC must reform themselves based on these principles. But if OIC becomes, Organization of Islamic Countries, becomes an instrument of Saudi Arabia, an instrument of another country, then you cannot have. It should be inclusivity of the Muslim Ummah. In the international order, P5 itself is the main violation of the principle of inclusivity, because 5 countries have more power in world order. We have to challenge them, and we have to make reforms. I hope my second home, Malaysia, will be a success story in all these sense. And I trust you, and I want to have best success to all of you personally. If you have any chance to come to Turkey, we can make this face-to-face lecture.
Yeah. We just came back from Istanbul last week, actually. We met with Bisaf.
Yes, yes, they mentioned. Therefore, I decided, when I learned that my students whom I didn't see, but who read my books, I said, okay, arrange this Zoom meeting anytime, whenever, Brother Ashraf, whenever you want. I am here. So you have seen this stuff, inshallah. Next
Thank you
time
very much.
when you come, we will be having face-to-face. I hope. This morning with my wife, I was talking during breakfast. I said, I wish to have one semester opportunity to teach in Malaysia so that I will be relaxed out of this political climate of Turkey. My time in Malaysia, 5 years, was the best time. The only sad things which we lived in Malaysia was I lost one of my daughters in Malaysia. Her grave is still in Malaysia, so have one part of my family, my heart is there in Malaysia.
MashaAllah. Ahlan wa sahlan.
Ahlan.
Inshallah. So maybe the last thing, maybe if there is any question from your old students in the Zoom meeting, maybe before Dr. Ahmed, you'll be going to Friday Jum'ah prayer, right?
Yes, it is approaching.
Okay. So
I've
maybe
already. Thank you.
if there is any last question.
I don't think so. I didn't see any. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Amer Bokvich is there. Amer. Mashallah, my old students are there.
Yes,
Amer.
yes, Dr. Ahmed.
Apa,
I am here.
apa kabar dari Indonesia?
Kabar baik.
Alvi, mashallah. My students are all there, yeah. So nice to
Thank
see
you,
all of
Dr. Ahmed. It is very nice to see you. And on behalf of all your students, we are giving you salams from all over the world. It was very
Thank you.
inspiring, always very inspiring to hear from you. Thank you so much. Çok
But
teşekkür
Amer,
ederim.
don't forget, next time I will make an exam on this lecture.
Okay, now we have GPT chat. We have GPT chat. It will be easy.
Nice to see you, Ame.
Cameras,
Yes,
please.
Brother Alvi, bir dakika Semih. Yes, how are you, Alvi?
I'm fine, bro. I'm fine.
Thank you. So,
Great
best
to hear
greetings.
you. Great to see you.
Thank you. Glad to see you again after so many years.
Is
Have
it
a seat.
possible to open your cameras, please, all of you?
Yes, I want to see all of you.
I would
Yeah.
like to take your photo.
Yes. Okay. Rafik.
Thank you.
Thank you very-
Abdurrahman.
Assalamualaikum.
Thank you very
Walaikum
much. Thank you very much to Mrs. Savage for arranging this meeting intellectual discussion for today. Thank you very much from us in Malaysia. As we come to the conclusion of today's academic session, I want to extend our deepest gratitude to Professor Dr. Ahmet Davutoğlu for generously sharing his time and intellectual insights with us. His vision for a just, equitable, and multipolar world order rooted in civilizational dialogue and mutual respect provide us with much to reflect upon, especially in the time of global transformation. So, thank you very much to all that comes today, and we hope to have another intellectual discussion afterwards with Dr. Ahmed. And I think Dr. Ahmed is very eager to share his insight and his intellectual ideas with all these young students and young researchers here, inshallah, in the future, in the near future, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you. Jumpa
Inshallah.
lagi.
Jumpa
Jumpa lagi.
lagi, inshallah.
Jumpa lagi di
Assalamualaikum.
Malaysia. Jumpa lagi.
Jumpa lagi. Allah Razi olsun.
Thank you. Most welcome. See you,
Görüşürüz.
inshallah.
Görüşürüz.
Assalam.
Güle güle Data.
Thank you. Allah'a ısmarladık. Allah'a emanet.
Allah'a emanet.